Welcome to the Everyday Warrior podcast, where we talk free to break free. As someone who's been told they talk too much, can speak with a mouthful of marbles, and might just be able to sell ice to Eskimos, I have found the perfect space to speak my truth and dive into deep conversations. This podcast is about celebrating everyday warriors, the people who face life's challenges head on, breaking through obstacles to build resilience, strength, and courage. Join me, your host, Trudy Marie, as I sit down with inspiring individuals who have fought their own battles and emerged stronger, sharing raw, real, and authentic stories that make you laugh, cry, debate, wonder, intrigue, feel all the emotions, and get curious about life with. This is a safe space to explore, question, and find your own path to new possibilities. Let us all embrace the warrior within and realise that while no one is walking in your shoes, others are on the same path, journeying through life together. Love the Everyday Warriors podcast? You can support the show for as little as $5 with a one-time donation or by becoming a monthly subscriber. Your contribution helps me continue bringing you inspiring stories of everyday warriors who overcome challenges to find strength, resilience, and new possibilities in life. Head to the link to buy me a coffee and fuel the next episode. Every bit counts. Please note that the following podcast may contain discussions or topics that could be triggering or distressing for some listeners. I aim to provide informative and supportive content, but understand that certain themes may evoke strong emotions or memories. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or in need of support while listening, I encourage you to pause the podcast and take a break. Remember that it is okay to prioritise your well-being and seek assistance from trained professionals. There is no shame in this. In fact, it is the first brave step to healing. If you require immediate support, please consider reaching out to Lifeline on 13 11 14 or a crisis intervention service in your area. Thank you for listening, and please take care of yourself as you engage with the content of this podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of Everyday Warrior podcast. Today I am here with Rosie Skene from New South Wales, and I met Rosie through a fellow guest prior, which is Andy Fermo. We seem to run in similar circles. So welcome, Rosie.
Thank you so much for having me, Trudy. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, it's great that you came on. Now, you're a former police officer with New South Wales Police, and we have similar stories in the sense that we've both been medically retired with PTS.
That's true. Yes, we have.
How long ago was that for you?
Look, I discharged in 2019. So 5 years I've been discharged now.
Yeah. So where would you like to begin your story in telling us about that?
I think I'll just start at the start of my policing story and just quickly run through that, I guess.
Sure,
So
go for it.
I joined New South Wales Police in 2007. So all up, I did 12 years. And I was living in Sydney at the time, but I'm a Coffs Harbour coastal girl at heart. So we were in Sydney and I moved down to Goulburn and did the training down there, which was just amazing, I think, for me at that age. It wasn't a childhood dream of mine or anything like that to become a police officer, but I just thought it would be a really great career option. And I did have a little bit of a desire to do something good, I think, for the community and keep people safe. So off I went, and then I was posted to a small country town in the New England region of New South Wales. So it's about 3 hours directly west of the coast to Inverell. And I did 4.5 years out there, and I think that was an amazing start to my career because it was a smaller station. I think there was probably about maybe 25 people in general duties at the time. So it was pretty close-knit, and my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, but we were pretty young and got on with some of the other younger crew as well. So we had a really great time out there. I got pregnant and had our first child when we were there. And then after about 4 years, we decided to move out west. So I did 4.5 years there, and then we went to a very remote location called Walgett. It's near Lightning Ridge. A lot of people know Lightning Ridge from the Opal Field. So it's in that same area. And it was super, super remote. So I think there was about 2,000 people in the town at the time. And we had about maybe 30 police and general duties there. So the population of Inverell was 12,500, but we had a very similar amount of police there. Yeah, police response was pretty much the same for a much less number of people. But it was a great time out there, and it was predominantly an Indigenous population, and we had 2 reserves out there as well. And it gets a really bad rap, but for me, I found the time there really rewarding. And I actually really enjoyed it until, sort of towards the end. So I was there for about 4.5 years. And about the 3.5 year mark, I think I just started to notice a bit of a change in dynamic in the station, a little bit of gaslighting, I guess you would say. I was also doing a bit of relieving out there as a sergeant. And, I'm just always one of those people that likes to do things by the book and just do the right thing. And other people didn't like doing that. And then me doing it made them look bad, I guess. So I sort of put a few noses out of joint out there, not through any fault, or I didn't have any intention of doing that at all. I just always tried to do the best job I could. So also while I was out there, I became a weapons instructor because I was really passionate about keeping police safe on the street. And we didn't have any female weapons instructors in our command at all, it was a massive command in space and like hundreds of thousands of square kilometers, I think it was huge. And there was only male police. And I remember doing a weapons training day myself, and I had noticed that the guys were really hands off with me. And I don't know if it was just me or if it was because I was female and, they didn't want to cross any sort of line in relation to touching each other. But I felt at the time that I wasn't getting the training that I should have been getting because crooks aren't hands off because I'm a female. So I think, you've got to train how you're going to play. And if I didn't feel like I was getting the right training, then what were the other women in the command feeling as well? So I put my hand up and just thought, why not? Why don't I just do it? And so I did. That was a 7-week course. So I had 2 children by then. I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and went away for 7 weeks to do that training. But I loved it so much. And I know that's where my passion for keeping first responders safe sort of started. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But so I did the weapons training, and in New South Wales, if you go to a special remote location, the tenure is 3 years. And after that 3 years, you pretty much get the pick of the state as to where you go to next. It's your reward for doing, a special remote location. And in the end, what I wanted to do was actually have my own police station. And then that special remote status doesn't mean anything anymore. It's all based on merit and the work that you do as a police officer. So I was fortunate enough to have done the work, and I moved back across to the coast and got my own lockup keeper police station just west of Coffs Harbour. And at the time, just before we were ready to move, I found out I was pregnant with our 3rd child. And I had 3 unplanned pregnancies, and they all came at very interesting times in my career. So I got the lockup job and then moved over to the coast and got stuck in the station in Coffs Harbour, one of the busiest police stations in the state, and just sat on the desk there until I sort of lost it, I think, there. That's when my PTSD started for sure. Well, I think the symptomology came about then. So I remember one of the jobs that really tipped me over the edge. I'd always been very stoic, very not emotionless, but I didn't let my emotions get the better of me at jobs. And one job I had, a 13-year-old girl came into the station with her mum to make a complaint about some images that had been sent to her phone through a friend that had been using the phone, talking to a guy. And I just started crying. And this mum was there with her daughter, like coming to the police to get some help, get some advice. And I was just so blown away by the relationship that the mum and the daughter had had. And obviously I was pregnant at the time as well. But that had never happened to me before. I'd never had my emotions get the better of me. And then I just started noticing little things I would cry before a block of shifts, the night before. I would cry. Then I would start crying on the way to work. And then I was crying on the way home from work. And I was like, what is going on? And because I was pregnant, I'm just like, oh, I'm just hormonal. I'm probably tired. And then one day at work, someone came in to report a missing 13-year-old girl. And she was from a facility, her parents weren't in the picture and she lived in a group home. She absconded a lot. But this was my very first time dealing with her and the people at that place because I was still relatively new to the station. And they just didn't come in with enough information. There was no photographs, there was no date of births or anything like that. And I blew my top. And it was about 8 o'clock at night. And I was so cranky. I kicked her out of the police station. I said, send her back, tell her to get her manager to call me. And then when the manager called me, I lost it at her as well. And I was just like, wow, I'm really angry. Like, I'm a very angry person. And I had never, ever been like that before, ever. So I went to my doctor and he wrote me off for the rest of my pregnancy. He's like, okay, there's too much stress there for you. You're about to have a baby in a few weeks. It's time to end it. So that was great. And immediately, once I had that piece of paper in my hand saying that I didn't have to go back to work, I can't even describe the relief that I felt around that, which felt really bizarre to me because I love policing and I love GDs. I love getting out on the street and working with someone in the truck. But having that piece of paper really felt like, oh, I don't have to worry about doing that anymore. It was so confusing. But then on the other hand, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have a baby in a couple of weeks. So now I need to prepare for that. And I had 2 other children. So I needed to sort out that whole family situation before the baby came. And then I had the baby. And then, of course, about 12 months later, it was time to work out the return to work plan. And then just like running into a semi-trailer or something like that, everything came back. The crying came back, the anxiety came back. I was incredibly paranoid about everything. What else did I have? Oh, just so many symptoms. And I said to my husband, he had gone away for some training. He went and joined the military. And I said to him on a phone call one day, I said, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to a doctor before I go back and just make sure that I'm okay in the head because, I feel a bit different. Things feel weird. I'm very emotional. Could still be because I've just had a baby. I just kept writing everything off because of the baby and pregnancy. Anyway, I went to the doctor and she said, okay, I think you need to see a psychologist. And, police, we just sort of don't even believe it ourselves, I think. So when I went to the doctor, I went with a little shopping list, because I'd had a baby. So I was like, yeah, I need to talk about contraception. Definitely not doing that again. I've got 3, that's enough. I need to do, I don't know, something else. And then I also, maybe we can talk about my mental health. And she's like, okay, well, what do you want to do first? And I'm like, actually, I think it's my mental health. I think things aren't right. So I got in to see a psychologist. The very next week, she was new to town, thank God, because she's fully booked now, and saw her. And then that's where my PTSD journey sort of started from there, I think. From that point of saying, I need some help, I'm not dealing with things. Yeah, that was it. That was the point. And then so I saw my psychologist for the very first time, B, and she was just completely amazing. She specializes in first responders and veterans. She's done a lot of work with the military, a lot of work overseas in war zones and horrific sort of places. So she really gets the nuances of the job. So that sort of part, I didn't have to explain it to her. All I had to do was explain myself and my journey and what has led me to being in her office. And I've been seeing her for 6 years now. Yeah, 6 years. So that was back in 2018 that happened. Yeah, so from there, obviously I had to make a decision what I was going to do with my career. And because my deepest sort of belief and passion in policing was keeping my teammates safe, and in the back of my mind, I knew I didn't have faith in my own ability at that time to keep whoever I was going to work with in the truck safe. So I felt I was either going to be not enough and not perform the role that I had to, or too much and take things maybe too far because I was angry or emotional. And both of those things I just wasn't comfortable with at all. So I decided to not go back. And then with that, I was then able to tailor my recovery around not going back, and being the best mum, that I could be for my kids, because ultimately that's the reason I had to leave, was to be a better person for them, because I was just too angry and not being the mum that I ever thought I was going to be, losing it at a 3-year-old for spilling, milk, or not making their bed, or all sorts. There were so many little things that when I thought about it, it made up this whole big thing, that I just wasn't comfortable with, and I wasn't comfortable in being that person anymore. So that's when I sought some help, and I guess that's where my PTSD journey started.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. Like,
It
it's
is so
such a
much.
quite comprehensive in what you've actually experienced. And I'll take you back through various things and you can kind of further explain. And the first thing that stood out for me is that whole sexual discrimination, the fact that there's a boys' club within this paramilitary style organisation, whether it's police, whether it's fireys, whether it's Defence Force, it seems to be this us and them attitude between men and women. And they like to think that it's part and parcel, like we're all the one big team. But when push comes to shove, part of my story is very much around that sexual discrimination style of circumstances. So what was that actually really like for you, especially in that sort of leadership role where you're being picked on not just for being a leader, but for being a female leader?
Yeah, look, I don't know if it was so much for being a female. Like, some of it, I don't know. I don't know if people feel threatened. I'm not sure. Like, I can't speak to it just being female. I just know that just being me, I think it was like, I didn't feel like it was directly because I was a female. I think because I was just doing the job that was supposed to be done. And I think a lot of people try to get away with not doing it. I think people can go a lot further in getting around doing things than actually doing the job. And I've just always been a person, get in, get it done, the job's done. And I think that's sort of where I came from with it. I think with the weapons guys, I don't think it's any fault of theirs. And I don't think it was any fault of the commands that there was no females there. I think it was just the situation. It's a very transient area because of the 3-year tenure. So people don't stay longer than that. My story was different because I wanted to do that course that I stayed 4.5 years, and they wanted to get a return on that investment, which was quite a lot to send someone away for 7 weeks. But yeah, I think not having women trainers there was just because there was no women trainers that came into the command. And the boys and the guys, the trainers that were there, they were really respectful as well. So yeah, in really sexual discrimination, not so much for me. It's definitely there, for sure. I think it's just people get their noses out of joint when other people do the jobs that they're supposed to be doing. It just makes them look bad. And I think that's what happened in my case.
Yeah, fair enough. And you don't think that if a male had have been calling the shots in the sense of doing things by the book and calling them on the fact that they weren't lifting to standards, that wasn't related to?
I don't know. The one particular person that happened to with me, there was another female that he did pick on a bit. And I just think it made him feel better, maybe. And, we were little people as well, like in stature, very small. So it made them feel bigger. I don't know what he did to other people, men even, because he was he was gaslighting. So in essence of being that sort of a person, you have to be quite sneaky and insidious about it. And he went about it in such a great way, like very well done to him in being who he was as that person. He has mastered his craft, because I absolutely looked like the crazy person that he made me out to be. But yeah, I'm not sure because he was so good at it. I don't know if he had targeted other people, and I wouldn't put it past him to target a male that he didn't like for whatever reason. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. And it's sad to think that there are people like that within any agency that will just walk over their fellow comrades to get what they want. It's like a personal agenda, and it happens in every agency, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely.
The next part of your story is like keeping first responders safe, and safety is such a huge value for me as well. So I kind of can relate to you in your story about that. But tell us more about like what was important for you about the safety, or what you felt like was lacking.
Yeah. So I think definitely at that time, like I said, I don't think that women in the command were getting the training that they needed, simply because everyone was very mindful of inappropriate touching of each other, going too hard. We weren't wrestling or grappling. It was really tricky being in that situation as a female, and one that had always wanted to do the best job I can. Like I said, I'm pretty small, so I'm only 163 centimeters tall, about 62 kilos. And I know that my strength in comparison to crooks is not there. So I needed to learn the techniques properly so that if I had to do it, they would be effective, or as effective as I could be. And when you only get training once a year for 1 day a year, and it's not a full day, you take it in turns and you go through this and that. I just didn't feel like that was enough to keep myself safe. And if I felt that way and I was actually quite passionate about it, the people that were a bit more relaxed about things definitely were not getting that training. And like I said, it's not really through any fault of the trainers that we had at the time, because they were amazing. I think it's just because we didn't have a female there that was happy to get hands-on with the other females. And I sort of took it upon I've always been a person that's like, we need this. Oh, fuck it. Sorry, if I can swear. I'll be that person. I'll do it. I can do that. Like, I'll help these other women. I'll help myself. So I got to go and do 7 weeks of training, 4 weeks of defensive tactics and 3 weeks of shooting. So my skills were increased. And then I could pass that information on to the other females that I was able to train. And, it didn't come naturally to me either. I'm very observant. So the defensive tactics did sort of come pretty easily. I was able to observe what we were doing and what other people were doing incorrectly and be able to correct that. But shooting, I was pretty terrible at it, to be honest. Like, I wasn't afraid of it, but I wasn't accurate. And I think from having so much complication with my own shooting enabled me then to learn so many different things that when I saw other people on the range and what they were doing, I was like, oh, okay, well, how about you try this? Move your hand here, grip it a little bit tighter, a bit looser, don't snatch, all those sorts of things. I was then able, even their stance, you're standing a bit, if you want to get the target, then you maybe need to be a bit more stable. Having my own little troubles like that enabled me to become a better trainer and help more people. Whereas I think, if you're getting a guy and I talk about guys because they're mostly in the units, but in those specialist units where a firearm's basically an extension of their arm and it comes all very naturally to them, I think sometimes they might struggle with actually teaching other people because they're not picking up on the troubles that they can have. And they don't completely, and again, not through any fault of their own, but they might just not pick up on those things and be able to help other people become better because they're not aware of it. Whereas someone like me who's had all the troubles and did everything wrong and had to overcome a lot, I think it made me a better trainer. So basically, it's all I wanted to do was just keep them safe, keep them safer than they were currently being, and give them as much information and skill as I could to help them do that.
100%. And two things that stand out for me there in what you said was, to begin with, it's like the males, it's where that line was in the fact that they didn't want to cross the line of being too hands-on with you, but you said that crooks don't care, which is so true. Like, as a female police officer myself, like, yeah, our male colleagues are trying to, in some ways, protect us and not get too hands-on with us. But at the same time, it doesn't matter what crook you got out there, male or female, in what kind of condition, they'll go you regardless. And so you have to protect yourself. So, and secondly, in the fact that you said that if it's up to me, like you can't advocate for change, but then not be willing to make the change yourself. So I think the fact that you were proactive in like, I'm going to learn this, I'm going to do this for me, but in turn it's going to help others. And, what an asset that you got to learn about your nuances, and then you could then pass that on so that other people became better technically, like in weapons and tactical, but they were also like you got to assist them in doing that and ultimately make a safer environment to work in. Because my
Yeah.
thing was, even inside of leaving, and I remember saying this to the medical board, is that we can't run into danger unless we know somebody's got our back. Because at the end of the day, we all want to go home to our families.
Yeah.
So the fact that you also had that on your mind that, you want these first responders to be safe in their job so that ultimately at the end of the day, they can go home.
Yeah, that's it. And like I said, you got to train how you're going to play. And just seeing so many people on the range actually petrified of going and having a shot, like just being so nervous that they're going to do it wrong or they're going to have to do a reaccreditation because they've failed. Like all of that nervous energy that they have, I think I was really conscious of that as well and just wanted to keep people as calm as I could. It's not that big scary thing. I mean, having a firearm, you carry it on your hip every day. You should know how to use it and what to do. So there were so many components of it that I really got a lot out of, making people feel a bit better about themselves and a bit more relaxed about doing it, as well as giving them, the tools and skills to help them.
Yeah, and it's a shame that, like, obviously sounds like New South Wales Police are the same as WA Police. Once a year for retraining is not enough.
Not
Like,
enough.
we should be training, I mean, once a month would be nice, but even once a quarter, like 4 times a year, is better than once a year.
Yeah.
And most people see it as like a pain in the ass, like, oh, I've got to go to training for the day. But it's such a crucial part of your role and part of your job. It's not like the online computer courses that you have to do yearly and like a tick and flick. It's like, no, this is your life. This is the work we do every day. Like, you need to be on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm a big believer in mandatory fitness testing as well. I think that should be something that should be brought in. I mean, you shouldn't be at the fittest on your last day at the police college. You should be fit for your career, and it will save so much injury as well. I could go on and on about that. I just really think that weapons training, weapons handling, defensive tactics, and physical health are part of the job role. And if you're not doing
100%.
that, if you're not doing that, then one, you're not performing your job properly, but you're doing yourself a disservice as well.
Yeah, no, totally get it. The other thing that you brought up, interestingly, which I can relate to as well, is emotions getting the better of you towards the end, which is when you really started to notice things. And I think this is male and female alike, that we become accustomed to being almost robots. We have to put on this stoic face of this is just part of the job. And the agency treat you the same way. Like, it's not until you go to like a string of bad accidents or incidents, I should say, or you go to what they deem to be a critical incident, that chaplains or psychs or whatever step in. Across the board, there doesn't seem to be a lot of debriefing at the end of the shift or debriefing at the end of an incident. And you're almost meant to just like, it's part of your job, move on next. And it's not until you start to recognize these emotions where you do break it at an inopportune time. For me, like you said with that girl, where you end up bursting into tears, for me it was like an attempted suicide that caused me to have the same kind of emotional reaction. It's like, it's a hard thing, and especially for males who, as a general rule in our current society, are told not to show their emotions.
Yeah, I agree. And, one of the things that happened to me, I don't know, my dad got really sick. So in between my second and third child, my second child, he was 1 year old when my dad passed away. And I was with him when he passed away in hospital. And I've spoken about this before, but I had become so robotic because of being a police officer that even when he died, I was like, okay, we've got to do this. We've got to do this. I'll go get the nurse. I'll tell them that he's passed away. And it was so lucky because we were in Coffs where I'd grown up, and my high school best friend, her mum was working in the nurse's station that night. And I went down there. I said, look, I'm pretty sure my dad's just passed away. And they said, no worries, we'll be up in a moment. It was probably a couple of minutes afterwards, my mum was there and everything. But I said, I'll go let the nurses know because there's a few things that they're going to want to do with him. So she chased me down the hallway and she's like, Rosie, 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 Rosie. I said, what? And she's like, you're not a police officer right now. This is your dad that's just died. You're allowed to feel that. And I just lost it because I had never been given, I needed that permission to feel. And, you know, now I cry all the time. I feel everything so deeply. Even the smallest things, you know, the smallest conversations, I feel so much more deeply than I ever did, even before I was a cop. But she gave me permission to feel the grief and the loss and, you know, what my mum was going through. My sister was there as well, you know, her grief. And if I didn't have that permission at that time from that one person that was there, like that was the universe putting her there that night, I probably wouldn't have felt it for years, because it was must have been another 4 or 5 years until I had my daughter, maybe, yeah, 3 years. I had my daughter after he passed away. And that was, you know, when all my emotions and symptomology came out. It probably wouldn't have been till then that I had actually grieved his loss. So I was so grateful for that, because we are so good and so well trained not to feel anything, which absolutely you need. 100%. It keeps you safe when you're at work. You can't be taking on everyone's emotions, and, you know, every job you go to, every death or every accident, you can't allow that to come in to a point. But it's when you can't switch that off, when you go home, then that becomes an issue. And if you're not feeling things with your family and those closest to you, that's a red flag. And I wish I had known that.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing, even like in talking about PTS. And I prefer not to say PTSD as in disorder or PTSI as in injury, because for me, what's there is that I don't have a disorder. I'm not injured. I've experienced post traumatic stress. And I think part and parcel of that stress comes from the fact that we are so stoic, we are so good at decompartmentalizing, is that it comes to a point where we actually can't distinguish between that. And it's not until we feel and we actually deal with those emotions, or are given permission to deal with those emotions, like you said, with the passing of your dad, that we actually then start to recognize, okay, this is how we could be. There's this way in the agency of you should do this and you should do that and you should be like this and you should be like that. And it's like, hold on a second, let's just backtrack here for a minute and just look at the alternatives. And I get asked all the time at the moment, like when I say to people, I'm a former police officer, medically retired due to PTS. And I speak to a lot of people and they're like, oh, my son or my grandson or my granddaughter or whatever have all just joined. What's your advice for them? And I say, get a psych early on in the piece.
100%. I say the exact same thing.
Yeah, if there's one thing I could say is that it doesn't matter whether they see them once a year, twice a year, once a quarter, but start that work regularly from an early onset so that you do have somewhere to go and vent and to be proactive in your own well-being, so that you never get to the point that you and I got to, where we hit rock bottom because we're up against a wall and there's nowhere else to go.
Yeah, 100%.
But if you're regularly checking in with yourself and who you are and how you react and what your responses are and how it's impacting on your family life, then those red flags come up way earlier and can be dealt with way quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's not such a big bucket of red flags, you know, it's just like one or two will pop up every now and then, and you can address it at the time. I agree with you. I've said the same thing to people that I know have joined. Please find a psychologist as early as you can. I think that should be absolutely mandatory as well, a 12-monthly check-in at least, because like you say, it's so much better to be proactive than reactive to mental health. I'm all for proactive mental wellness, and I couldn't agree more with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when you talked about like going back to work after your pregnancy and having that relief with the doctor's certificate of like, I don't have to go back. And I can totally relate to that in the sense of when I got the doctors, as much as it was like, you've been diagnosed with PTS, and I'm like, I don't want to be that person. But it was this sense of relief that I could actually start to look after me and not have to deal with work, because I was the same as you. starting to cry before a shift, at the end of the shift, at the beginning of a block of shifts. Like, it became so overwhelming that just that relief, that's one thing I don't have to deal with, that you can just start afresh and kind of go, right, what do I need for me to recover?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's so much stigma with it, isn't there? To go off with, post-traumatic stress. I think when I went off, when was that, 2018, people didn't believe me. They just thought that I wanted to have extra time off with my daughter, because I'd been on maternity leave and I just didn't want to come back. And sort of one of those people that doesn't give a shit what other people think anyways, but it did annoy me a lot, that stigma that's attached to seeking help for mental health and saying, you know what, I have had enough. I can't do this anymore. And this is the reason why. I think there is a lot of shame felt, but I don't think that there should be, because, the stats don't lie with, first responders and mental health conditions. You can only do so much time in a job role like that and seeing the absolute worst of humanity every single shift that you go on and not be affected by it. It can't happen. Like, you can't not be affected by the things that you see and do in those job roles. It would be ludicrous to think that that would be the case. And unfortunately, people in very, very high positions try to make people believe that you shouldn't feel like that. You should keep marching forward and moving on, and those ones that leave a week or whatever, that stigma really has to change. And I feel like it's slowly, very slowly changing, in the fact that people are seeking help because people like you and I are talking about it so openly that it's okay that you have been affected by the job that you've done. You shouldn't feel any guilt about that, because I remember talking to my psychologist and saying, oh, there's something wrong with my brain. What is going on with my brain? She goes, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your brain. Your brain's actually doing everything that it needs to do to protect you right now from what you've seen, what you've done, what you know. And that was so relieving for me, because I thought I was crazy, like actually crazy. And I'm like, no, my brain's just doing what it needs to do to keep the rest of me safe. And I think just education, I'm really about mental health education, and the literacy of first responder mental health is, again, increasing, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be, for sure.
No, and 100%. And I even look at things like within the agency, New South Wales Police is probably the same as WA Police, is that there's that thing around Are You OK Day. They're like, oh, yeah, let's tell us how you feel and that you're okay. And no, this is a gimmick. This is not a joking matter. This is something that we need to be aware of all the time, with no shame or guilt. And I think the biggest thing any first responder, or any person in the community for that matter, that does experience some kind of mental health issue, is to actually say, hey, I need help. Like, it's the first brave step, courageous step, to actually asking for help. And I know firsthand, in the sense of, for me, that was a brave step in saying, yeah, there's something wrong, because I've been this strong, independent, cop, single mum, does it all on her own, to actually go, hold on a second, I'm not coping. But also recently, the example I've set for my kids, like my son is having some issues, and he put up his hand and said, hey, I'm 22 and I've got some shit going on and I need to deal with that. And not only did he deal with it personally, but he spoke about it publicly to say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. It's okay to say that you need some help. And I think that that's where the mental health literacy, like you said, needs to go, is that there is no stigma. It's okay to be not okay, but we need to do a more regular check-in and a more genuine check-in, as opposed to one day of the year because you're told to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And isn't that amazing too? Obviously having someone like you as his mum, who's so open and honest about what's going on in your life, then flows on to your children, just having names for feelings and emotions, so they're able to say, this is what I'm feeling right now, or I'm feeling, I don't know what I'm feeling, but it feels really hot in my chest, okay, you're feeling, or butterflies in my tummy, okay, you've got a little bit of anxiety happening, are you worried about something? Having those conversations with people, even if they're little people, allows them to grow up knowing that these things are okay. And I think, you know, as adults, we can learn it. But I had a conversation with my 7-year-old the other day. She was climbing. I posted on Instagram, and it's just about awareness, you know. She was climbing on the rocks and she started talking. And I said, hang on, can you stop? I want to record this because I know that what you're about to say is going to be amazing. And she was like, you know, Mum, when I'm jumping on these rocks, all I'm thinking about is these rocks. And I don't have to worry about school or maths or my uniform, because she's an anxious little girl. And but she's so aware that when she's doing something as mindful as stepping over rocks, she's not thinking about anything else. Just having that little bit of education from such a young age, she'll be able to grow that and then use that throughout her pre-puberty, puberty, adolescence, early adulthood, and then again into her adult life. And then if something comes up for her, she's going to be aware of it. But if people don't talk about it and have skills in how to deal with things like what comes up for first responders, we can't change anything, you know, like we have to get the information to the people. And unfortunately, there's some sort of block there. I don't know where it happens. Is it at the academy? I don't know. Where it's like, no, we don't talk about this. We go out and do our jobs, and, you know, you might feel a bit stressed here and there. Go have a walk or go do this, which is great. But we definitely need to be doing a whole lot more to help people, because the fact is we're so short on police nationwide, probably worldwide, to be honest. But I know nationwide, I think I saw a number, maybe 6,000 or 7,000 cops under strength for the country. I know there's about 2.5, maybe just for New South Wales. But we need good cops on the street. And if we can't support them with their mental health and they're not feeling that support, they're not going to stay. And then where are we? We've got no one to come and help us when we need them.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk specifically about police, but it's the same with fireys and paramedics, like nurses, like we're all in the same boat. We're all seeing shit on a daily basis that we wish we never had to see, and that the general public don't get. Like, they don't get what we're exposed to, and where it's okay to have those feelings, like you said, and recognizing those feelings. And I remember sometimes going to stations, and I was one of those persons that would be quite abrupt, in the sense that if I was frustrated or angry, I would let it out in the moment, and I would be like, you know, fuck this, and, you know, actually vent it. And I would get told to, that's not appropriate behavior and you shouldn't be doing that, and you should learn to control your emotions and not have those outbursts. And you start to then become desensitized to exactly what you're feeling. And then same as a female, especially female coppers, that a job you can go to can bring a tear to your eye. And if you happen to cry because you've seen something quite tragic or traumatic, that's okay too. Go and have your cry for 5 minutes, feel the emotions that you're feeling, and then come back to like what's normal. But you get told like, no, you're a cop, you shouldn't be showing that kind of emotion or whatever. And even if you don't do it on the job and you do it at home, I think we become so desensitized that we don't even know how to feel it at home. And that's when the drinking starts, the gambling starts, the isolation starts, because you don't know how to cope. You get told you can't express it a certain way at work. So then you go and find another coping mechanism. Yeah, and then that doesn't work. And then that causes a whole compound of effects going on. So, yeah, you're right. There needs to be some work done, not just within ourselves, but within our families as well, so that we're raising a generation of people who know how to respond and feel and react in an effective way, as opposed to just being these stoic robots that don't know how to do anything.
Yeah, for sure. Even just saying that, you know, with my kids, my daughter's super emotional as well. And I use her as an example because she feels everything. Like, she feels everything so deeply. And I've even caught myself saying to her, stop crying. But then I'm like, no, actually you can cry. You can cry if you like, you know, but feel what you're feeling. And then we're going to talk about it and then we're going to move on. But I've grew up, I know, in the 80s and 90s of, you know, we don't cry. You get over it, you know, toughen up a bit. But now I catch myself, you know, I'm not perfect, but I'm mindful of it as well. So, you know, I'll be like, okay, you don't need to cry. Actually, no, you can cry. Do what you like with that. And I think we just need to become more aware as parents as well, that we are raising people that feel safe to have emotions, because that will definitely put them in good stead. for sure.
Yeah, and that leads me into what you're doing now post being part of New South Wales Police. And I love what you've created, and I love the analogy that you use around what you've created with Tactical Yoga Australia. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so where I stopped with my psychologist in my journey, and I said that was the start, it actually really was. So I mentioned that my husband was away. So when 3 months after we had our daughter, he left for 12 months to do military training. He wanted to join the army, and he joined at the very same time that I joined the police. And they said that he couldn't go full time because I was stuck in New South Wales, and they didn't want to send him away and ruin that relationship. Like, good on the army actually for doing that. So he was a reservist, and that didn't work out because of our location. So fast forward like 10 years, he actually got the opportunity then to go full time. And we discussed that as a couple and said, yeah, go and do it. And of course, he got the call up when I had a 3-month-old baby and 2 kids at home. So 3 kids. So I was a single parent for 12 months. And when I was diagnosed, nearly, 9 months later, I didn't feel safe for my kids to take medication, to trial medications, because I was the only responsible adult that they had. And I just didn't want to put them in a position where I wasn't able to care for them. I don't have any problems with medications at all. And I think you just got to do what you need to do for your mental health. But this is where my journey started. So I decided not to take any medication, but that led me to having to find another way to process my trauma and to start my recovery from that. So we moved, he was supposed to get posted to Brisbane. Things changed. He got posted to Adelaide. So we all moved down to Adelaide in 2018. And at the start of 2019, I started doing regular yoga. So I went to this beautiful little shala run by Beck. It was in the back of her house. She had this beautiful room, and there was myself and 3 other women and Beck. And that session, the very first session I went in there, I told her a little bit about my story. She's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, actually, I have post-traumatic stress. I used to be a cop, like oversharing because I'm so anxious, blah, 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 blah. So I'm just really hoping that this might help. I've done it a few times before. And she's like, okay, calm down, just have a breath. But at the end of that class, like, my whole life had changed in 1 hour. I was like, oh my gosh, why wasn't I doing this 10 years ago? Why wasn't I doing this 5 years ago? Maybe I would still be in the job. I don't know. But I processed so much in that class. So I started going once a week, then it was twice a week, then it was 3 times a week. I'm pretty sure she got sick of seeing me, but I just loved it so much. And at that time, because I was still like really early in my journey, I didn't want to be around people. I actually, hate people. People are the worst. Like, that's how I was at that time. Really just didn't want to be around anyone. So there was these 3 other women there, but they were all older than me and really maternal, and sort of held me in that space for a couple of years where I felt it was safe to be me. It was safe to be a woman, something that I had never really felt, because prior to policing, I was in a kitchen working as a chef, which is another male-dominated industry. So pretty much from 20 to 30 something years old, even younger, I was about 16, I think. So for that whole time, I'd sort of pushed my femininity to the side and very much in the masculine. So being with those women allowed me to feel what it was like to be an actual woman and a mother and a wife and all of those things. And it was so profound. One day during my relaxation, though, I just had this epiphany again. I was like, imagine if police, because that's where I'm from, but first responders and veterans, but imagine if they had this practice that they could do anywhere that they wanted to do it. And I know from being so remote in Walgett, there was really not really much available. There was a yoga teacher there, but the classes were sporadic and whatever. But I'm like, they need to do this. And breathing, like, imagine if they learned how to breathe properly, the anxiety would come down. And so I had all these thoughts, and obviously, what am I going to do next with my life? And I thought, again, I'll be the one, I'll do it, I'll bring it to them. So I did. So I became a yoga teacher. I did my yoga teacher training, and for the sole purpose of bringing it to first responders, veterans, and frontline workers. That's the only people that I teach. But I also am very, very conscious of my own energy, and I needed to do it in a way that I wouldn't relapse. So I've created an online program for first responders, veterans, and frontline workers, and it incorporates not only yoga, breath work, and mindfulness, because they're the three core concepts, but also a bit of the first responder psychology that leads into our PTS and where that comes from, and all the little things that we're not, the literacy, the mental health literacy that we don't get. I'm obviously not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a doctor of any, but I understand some of it. And what I do know is what I've passed on, all referenced, all very grounded in science. So that's in there. And then that leads into doing some breath work and learning how to breathe both in the job, if you're still in the job, or if you're transitioning out and you're going through that process, or even if you're like us and you've been out for a little while and you're just like, I need to do something else. It's all there. So yoga and then mindfulness. And what I think is the most important part is how you bring everything that you've just learned through the program into your house and into your home and with your family, and how to reduce anxiety within the home, because it's very contagious. If you, especially for police, like any first responder, we have a presence about us. And when we are feeling something, usually the people around us are feeling it as well. And you'll see it in your homes. When you have high anxiety, usually you'll set the other people off in your house as well. So there's tools and stuff in there around that and around helping your family as well as yourself. So yeah, the program's like 12 weeks long, but you can do it quicker or slower. There's implementation weeks, so it's not like you have to rush around and get it all done. You learn a skill and then you implement the skill. I think it's a beautiful way, and it's the thing that I wish that I had 5 years before I left policing. That would have kept me. I just wish I had those skills. I don't know if it would have kept me in the job, who knows, but I think having some skills like that I can tap into whenever I want. For example, when our body goes into the stress response, it can take between 20 and 60 minutes to come back into the parasympathetic. So when you're going from job to job to job, you've got literally the car trip from one job to another. Like, that's not coming down. But if you learn these breathwork techniques, you could literally do it in minutes and bring your body back into the parasympathetic. And, studies have been shown that if you do that, you're less likely to suffer from PTS. The quicker you can get your heart rate down back to a normal, the less likely you are to suffer PTS from that. So, it's not woo-woo. I'm very much not a woo-woo person. I'm not with my crystals and all those sorts of things around me, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that's just not me. I'm very much a police officer. I'm very much the tactical side of things. Like, I like to have some sort of tactic around it. And that's why I've chosen the name Tactical Yoga Australia, because you can use yoga and you can use breath work and you can use mindfulness in a tactical way to support your mental health. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing there. And I really am so passionate about it, because it's just the way that I can now help keep first responders and veterans and frontline workers safe mentally, not so much physically, but definitely mentally. It's life-changing. And, I've got clients now who are coming through, men, which is definitely who I try and target men, because they're the least likely to come and try it. But one in particular, he said, I've always been very fit, always in the gym, playing sports, and this has knocked me around a lot with his post-traumatic stress. And he's like, I don't want to be on my meds, because that reminds me that I have this post-traumatic stress. And he's like, what I'm doing now with the yoga and hopefully with my doctor is that I can reduce the amount of medication I take and use this, exactly like I do, to treat his stress and his post-traumatic stress from working as a police officer. So, it's getting great results and I really love it so much. It's like my other baby, but it works. It really works. And, like I said, medication is for some people. It definitely wasn't for me. And this is just what I've used to help me process all my trauma.
Yeah, and I love what you're doing. And what's there for me inside of that is that you talk about it as a tactical option, and especially as police officers, we have multiple tactical options to go through, whether it's our firearm, our taser, our baton, our OC spray, you know, hand-to-hand combat. They're all the different tactics we can use on a job. And you bring this approach that there's breath work, there's yoga, there's mindfulness, there's all these tactics we can do to help maintain our stress levels. And it's like choosing the right tactic in the right setting. You know, it's not easy to go and do a big yoga stretch in the middle of the job, but if you can be mindful, or you can do breath work in the car on the way to your next job, or, you know, if you're out like us then, or transitioning, then you've got these options that help you to get through all this process. And I think like that's incredible in the way you do it. And the fact that it's also online is that for most part, when you look at yoga as a whole, or mindfulness, or breath work as a whole, it's predominantly a female-driven community. And by providing a safe space where people can do this in their own home, in their own privacy, is that you don't have to be the cop that goes to, you know, work or is like seen at a yoga like studio or whatever. You can do this on your own, but then by recognizing that it works for you, then it'll start to reduce some of that stigma where you can go out in public and do it, and you can bring some of your fellow comrades and colleagues in to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because that's exactly what I thought as well. You know, we need to feel safe, and we generally don't, especially if you're either serving or freshly out, with the general population. We just don't. So the idea that people could do this program, learn some yoga, and then have the confidence to maybe go out into the community and make actual genuine connections with other people is what I hope people will do. You know, absolutely stay at home and do the yoga that I have. But I want people to connect with other people as well, you know, but it takes time to get there. And the other thing is, like, it has to be online, because I want it to get to as many people in as many remote places as it can, because I think everyone should be doing it. Everyone should at least learn how to breathe properly, for sure. There's so many little things that I wanted to help people, and online, feeling safe, not feeling like a goose, being able to do it in your tracky decks if you want. You know, you don't have to wear any Lululemon tights or the perfect yoga outfit. You don't have to be a size 6. The yoga that I teach is very trauma informed, and it's definitely for any person in any sort of body at any age. You know, anyone can do it. It's just not for those teeny tiny females that have beautiful photo shoots on Instagram, you know.
Yeah, my daughter's one of those.
You see? Good on her.
I can laugh about that because, like, you know, she looks amazing and I wish I looked that good when I was doing yoga. But for me, like, it is one of my go-tos. Like, I live in a very small community, and we were lucky that we have a yoga instructor that lives within the community. So normally once a week, once a fortnight, when she's available, like, she does a class, which is amazing, and I can actually be in that. And she only has like half a dozen people, but you're right, just being able to get back into a safe space in public, because half the time we are very mindful and very hypervigilant about the public and the environments that we're in. So finding that space to feel safe, but also just being able to feel our own bodies. I think, especially as first responders, you are so go, 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 going job to job to job, shift to shift to shift, that you actually, you know, if something comes up, whether it's a backache, a neck ache, a feeling, that you actually kind of dismiss it. A bit like you going back to the time where you were like, oh, this is pregnancy hormones. Like, you become so disconnected to your own body that you don't feel how you're responding to things. Like, and actually yoga is such a mindful way of actually connecting. Like, does this hurt? If it hurts, why? Is there something else going on? Or, you know, if I'm stretching this more, can I actually start to feel everything else in my body start to like drift away, because you've healed one little component, then that has a flow-on effect to all your other parts. So it's not just this, like you said, this woo-woo thing of doing it. It's a mindset. It's a physical way of connecting with who we are as human beings in this life we're living.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know that I was walking around with my head in one place and my body was just following along. Like there was no connection between my mind and body for many years. And the thing that yoga does is exactly what you said. It brings your mind and your body back together, and you're aware of like, oh my gosh, I have fingers at the end of my arm, like they're there. I have an awareness of my body and how I carry myself in space now. Like in the world, I know how I'm standing. I know what my posture's like. I'm not, just begrudgingly carrying my body through the world. And there's so much power in that, in bringing your mind and body together and working as one solid unit. It's such a beautiful thing and it's an amazing experience. And I don't think I really realized how disconnected I was until I started doing yoga. And I was like, okay, yeah. In this moment, I'm taking a breath in and I'm just lifting my arm up above my head. And then I'm going to breathe out and then I'm going to bring it back down again. I mean, it seems so simple, but it's so, so powerful. It's incredible.
Yeah, and even in like Shavasana and just at the end of a session, like you're in that mindfulness space of just totally being in your body. I mean, that's such an easy thing for most first responders to be able to do at the end of a shift. Like first, when you go home, have a shower, get comfortable, and just lie in Shavasana and just be for whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, but just to decompress in a way that you're just not connecting to anything else but yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so important. I mean, at the end of my shifts, and I'm not sure when the point was that I stopped doing it, probably when I was pregnant, but I always used to disconnect from work by changing my clothes at the end of a shift. I know a lot of people just wear their shirt underneath and then pop a shirt on top. But I was always very mindful from the start of my career to, okay, I get to work and that's when I become a constable. And then at the end of my shift, okay, I'm taking that off now. And now I'm just back to being Rosie. And I think we lose that, the longer you're in a career like that, it's sort of all intertwines and, it's a bit of a metaphor, but you're wearing your shirt home and there's a lot of disconnect there. So if you have a practice where you can physically end your shift and then be present. I know, people that commute usually do it in the car, they decompress, they have, half an hour or an hour trip home, they listen to a podcast or something. But easily you could do some breathing while you're in the car to process what's happened that day, or a Shavasana. And, when you get home, I just want 5 minutes, I'll be with you guys. How powerful is that you can just let go of that and then move on with the other part of your life, because work's not everything. It's just what you do to get an income to live the rest of your life, right?
Yeah, and I think I can totally relate to that because I know even my sisters and my kids said to me at some times that you are literally a cop 24/7. Like you don't know when to switch off. And I know that that happened more, especially towards the end of my career, that you do become this person that it's not just a job, it's a way of being and it's a life. And I know that, because one of my highest values is safety, that comes part and parcel with that. But you're so right. It's a way of disconnecting yourself from what you do as opposed to who you are.
Yeah.
And I think we all have to remember that it doesn't matter what type of first responder you are, that you can separate between what you do and who you are. It's only a small component. You're only that, I mean, for you, it was 12 years. For me, it was 8. But it's only a small period of that time. And we forget that it's not our life. And for those people who have been in the job 20, 30 years plus kind of thing, it's like, no, you have to remember that you have a life outside of like being a
You're
first
right.
responder.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, there's a whole life outside. And it's pretty amazing. I think we can become pretty pessimistic as first responders, because we see literally the worst of what the world has to offer as a regular thing. But it's all pretty amazing out there. And there's some pretty wonderful people that you don't get to see. So it's nice if you can leave that behind as much as you can and then go and enjoy the rest of your life with the people that actually love you the most and enjoy that. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, and I think for me, what I've come to realize too is that they talk about, and it's probably the same with New South Wales Police as it is for WA Police, that we talk about this blue family, or, you know, if you're a fiery, it's the red, if it's you're a paramedic, it's the green, and you're walking that thin line together. But when push comes to shove, you're just a colleague. And when you've left that station or left the agency, those people are no longer around. Like at the end of the day, no one gives a shit. So you're right. It's like, it's a small part of us. Go and spend time with those people who actually love, care, and support us in everything we do within our whole life, and not just the people that we think are looking after us in the job.
Yeah. You know, something I have noticed in that though, because I think the same thing, you know, no one's more X than an X, but the X's get together, you know, and that's a new community as well. In New South Wales and ACT, we have a charity called Emergency, and it's run by two former New South Wales police sergeants, best friends. They're beautiful women, and they just knew that we needed a space where we could share, you know, the processes of disengagement from the police and all that sort of stuff. And I help them out sometimes, but they are amazing, and they've just created this community of like 3,000 people that have left or in the process of leaving, and you can help each other out there as well. Whereas you're not getting that from the inside. It's only when you come outside and you can see, you know, there are actually people like yourself and like me that still have a love for that job. We just can't do it anymore. And whether it be organizational or some other injury or illness that you have because of that job, that you can't do it, it doesn't mean that we don't care anymore. We probably care more because we have clearer eyes. We're not stuck in that environment. We can see what's actually going on there. And, you know, we're like, hey, let us help you with getting out and enjoying the rest of your life now. Or let us help you do your job and stay in the job that you love, but also able to live your life on the outside as well.
Yeah, it's like taking the blinkers off and actually having a clearer view of.
Just lifted my sunnies up and put them on my head. I'm like, wow, okay, yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. Like, we do probably care more than, I know that I'm, you know, mentoring or providing, you know, guidance for other colleagues at the moment who have come across me on social media or whatever and are like, okay, you've been through this process. What do I expect? Or how do I get through this? Or what can you help here? And I love being able to pass that information on, because sometimes the agency only gives you on a need to know basis.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
it's such a red tape, bureaucratic process, because it is government, it's a government agency, that people don't know, and they get more anxious inside of what is going on, or what they don't know what's going on. So just having somebody who's been there, done that, and can provide it. And I don't mind providing that information. I'm like, I'm an open book. You want to ask me a question? Ask me a question, because you don't need to talk about the trauma. You don't need to talk about what's going on for them. It's like, here's the process. Here's what you can expect. I don't want you to be alone, because if there's one thing, probably like you at the time going through this back in 2018, is that you feel alone in the whole process, because you feel like you're the only one going through it. But they also isolate you from having contact with anybody else who potentially is going through it. And unless you can find each other outside the agency, it's so lonely going through it. So having somebody else walk alongside you during that process, or holding your hand through it, is amazing.
Yeah. I mean, are you happy if I talk about my podcast?
Go for it.
So yeah, just in relation to that, you know, having that information, and mental health literacy is something that I'm very, very passionate about for first responders and frontline workers and veterans, because so what I did, I just created a podcast myself at the start of the year, because I was sick of seeing, but it just literally broke my heart every time I would see a first responder or veteran suicide, which felt like it was happening every second day. I'm like, these people must be feeling so alone. Who are they talking to? Who's talking to these people? I know for me, not many people were talking to me about it. I want people to know that things will get better for them. At some point, like, you're not going to get stuck in this spot for a long time. So I created my podcast, Triumph Beyond Trauma, with the hope of just sharing stories from people, just normal people who have gone through something traumatic and are now on the other side of that. They've found their way through the weeds and through the shit and are now like in a place where they can say, you know what, it actually will get better. And I've had recently, we've had some pretty wild changes in New South Wales Police in relation to some entitlements. So I had someone talking about that and what that looked like for New South Wales Police, because they were getting fed not a lot of information. So we've done our own research onto what that change would mean. And then I had the next week a New South Wales workers' compensation solicitor come on and talk about the process from the very start of putting in your injury notification form to discharge and beyond. And the feedback that I got from that was just like, thank you so much, because I didn't know half of this stuff. I had someone call me. He's been out for 8 years and he didn't know that he had any entitlements. He had to sell his family home, had to move in with the in-laws, with the kids. Like, he's a broken man and he just had no support. And he's like, thank you so much for having that episode on, because now I know that I can make a phone call, which he's doing, to see if he can help his family. There's just no information out there. And again, I was just like, okay, I'll do it. Let me bring the information and stories about people, because I don't want people to feel like there's no other choice but to end their life. It literally breaks my heart that that's how people must feel. And thankfully for me, I've not ever been there. But you mentioned like Andy Fermo, he came on and he talked about his journey, which is amazing. And you came on and had a chat about your journey, and it just normalizes what we all go through. Anyone in any job role, it doesn't matter if you're a first responder or a veteran or anything else, you could be working in a bank and go through traumatic experiences. Just know that there's going to be, you're not always going to be sitting in this forever. And I think that's so important that we hear other people's stories. And I think podcasting is a great way to convey messages, especially for people that have dealt with trauma, because we can struggle to read long texts and books and all those sorts of things, but you can pop some earphones in and go for a walk for an hour and feel a bit better that you're not the only one that's going through it. I think it's so important.
100%. And I think that's also the beauty of a podcast is, like you said, when you get over anxious or overwhelmed, that, reading something or trying to do that, it can be really, really difficult. But also when you put the headphones in and you listen to a story, you're listening to those real life voices that you hear the genuineness, you hear the authenticity, and you don't feel alone, because it's almost that words of wisdom coming through. And that's why I do my podcast, is like, I felt like inside of my whole experience, I lost my ability to speak. I lost my voice. And if I can give not only a place for me to share my story and what goes on with me in my life, but a platform for other people to share their stories and what they overcome. And I always say is, I may not be walking in your shoes, but I'm walking along the same path with you. Or if I'm not, somebody else is. And we're never going to know each other's individual circumstances, but there's so many people dealing with so many similar things that if we just know that we're not alone, it takes the pressure off. Like, all of a sudden you're just like, oh, it's not just me.
Yeah. There's two things I know to be true. One is that none of us have ever done this before. We've never lived before. And we're all going to die at the end of it. No one's getting out alive, and things are going to come up. And if you can listen to someone else's story and get something out of it and just, feel a little less alone, how amazing is that? Like, I think we're living in an age it can be anxiety inducing, the amount of information that we have out there, but there's also ways that we can connect that we never have before. And I think that's truly amazing.
Yeah, thank you so much for being a guest today and sharing your story and what you're up to. I will definitely put all your contact details in the show notes for anybody who wants to follow you, wants to connect with you and find out more about Tactical Yoga Australia.
Thank you so much for having me, Trudy. I love your podcast and I love what you do as well. So thank you for having me on.
You're so welcome. And I always like to finish the episode with asking, what are you most grateful for today?
Today, I am most grateful for some rain. that we're having, because we have just dug up our backyard and put some turf down. So I'm thrilled that it's raining here, but always my family. I'm the most grateful for my family because, you know, they're the ones that I get to come home to every day, which is amazing.
Thank you for tuning in to the Everyday Warriors podcast. If you have an idea for a future episode or a story you'd like to share yourself, then please message me, as I am always up for real, raw, and authentic conversations with other everyday warriors. If you love what you are hearing, please be sure to subscribe and hear all the latest episodes, and spread word to your family, friends and colleagues so they can listen in too. If you are sharing on social media, please be sure to tag me at _Trudy_Marie_ so I can personally acknowledge you. I am always open to comment about how these episodes have resonated with you, the listener. It would also mean the world to me if you were to leave a 5-star review to ensure that the Everyday Warrior podcast is heard by more listeners around the world. And remember, lead with love as you live this one wild and precious life.